Hi, my name is Benedict for High Hertz. In this video, looking at Native Instruments Massive X. It's been out for a while now. It is an interesting instrument. It's an instrument that can do a lot, but has some funny limits, which may or may not really be a problem. I think they're probably not so much of a problem, but it's not for the faint of heart. And when, like, Massive before had been really popular with the EDM set and what have you. I think people felt like they could get the sound out of it really fast, really easily. Fair enough. It wasn't a synth that ever appealed to me. Massive X is a radical departure. It's not Massive version 2.0. It's a completely different synth. In many ways, they might have been better off calling it something different, which I guess to some extent they did by whacking the X on the end, going, say, "Ooh, this is different." And its difference, I think, confused people. And to be honest, I think there was some confusion even on my side when I first looked at this to go, "Ooh, what's that?" And as I opened it up again for this, I looked at it and thought, this is interesting, but I've got to get my head around what it really is. And then I did. And that is that it is a bit unique. It's in some ways a little bit more like a Euro rack than your standard, here's all your bits and pieces of a synthesizer all put together and stuck like this. So let's have a look at where it's from. Of course, from Native Instruments. There was a fair bit of fanfare when it was released, as they saw it as a big deal. And as I pointed out, I think there was some confusion in the market, and the fact that they probably went to a section of the market that wasn't really wanting this kind of thing. But there have been lots of things. Sugar Bytes Factory, Pigments, all of these synths that are sort of offering a bit of this and a bit of that in a different kind of a framework, so that they don't look like your traditional Jupiter 8 style synthesizer. And great, it's good to see people moving and trying different things. Does it work? If you're expecting a Jupiter 8, no, it doesn't. But does it work if you're open to what the paradigm is? I think it definitely does, if you're the right person for the instrument. In terms of price, $199 US. With taxes and conversions, it comes to $300 in Australian. So it's not a cheap synth. It's not stupid expensive, but it's definitely up there with all the competing Uber synths. In many ways, this is an Uber synth, but you do need to get your head around how it works. Now, having a quick look, then we'll go through the goods and bads, and then through a bit of a walkthrough. You are presented with this somewhat interesting view. You can change sizes, but the leaps from one to another are quite large. I think that either being able to drag, and this was a little earlier in that whole sort of resizing interface thing, or some more jumps, but whatever, it works, and it's large enough at 100%. You then got this kind of rather even confusion of things. Some things are not labeled the way you would normally anticipate. But as I said, in many ways, everything about this is not Jupiter 8. And that's an important thing to come to terms with, to be able to start with the way the device does work. You get a pair of oscillators, and they're a wavetable oscillator. No, you can't import your own wavetables. As far as I can find, there is no way to import your own wavetables or samples, which I think is probably not the best thing. We know that Native Instruments, Kontakt, Reaktor, all of that has the technology, so why it's not here, don't fully understand. You've got the ability to play back in quite a lot of different modes, which I am not going to get into here. This is a synth where you really do want to spend some time with the manual and also really spend some time playing with it. I'm going to focus more on the architecture and how to begin to get your head around how to use it and how to make the most of what it really does have to offer. They are interesting oscillators with interesting possibilities, and that is very good once you overcome the initial sense of wah. So this pair of oscillators, they are the same as each other. You've then got this phase modulation. People would know that more as FM. Phase modulation is the true name for Yamaha's FM, and this offers another pair of oscillators and then a third auxiliary input to allow you to modulate or modify to FM your basic oscillator tones. That provides a lot of power all on its lonesome. A couple of noise sources, again, it's all sort of preset sounds that they've provided, but there's a pretty reasonable range of things, and I haven't looked too deeply into what every single thing sounds like. We've got a filter with different models. We've then got 3 slots for effects, one of which can be to fly in a whole other oscillator. So there are 3 of those, basic amp section, and then slots for effects. Again, not my favorite effects, but they will work within the context of the sounds more often than not. But as usual, take care you don't over-effect and then run into issues when you come to mix it. You've then got the second half, the lower half of the instrument. And this gets a little confusing because things are strangely named. E1 through 3 are envelopes. One of them is hardwired. The amp envelope is hardwired. You've then got these slots in which you can put in couple of different types of envelopes, an LFO and a random. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of those slots exist, which can be routed, and we will show you how that works. They then got these, which really probably should have been referred to as P1 through 4, as in performance stuff. So this is driven by what note you play, what velocity you play at, and velocity off, gates on and off, inverse gates, and what have you. So that's your performance stuff, which you can then assign to things. And then, and again, I'm not going to get into this as I virtually never get into sequences, you've got the ability to build these sequences and use them as modulators, and they can be controlled and triggered via MIDI, and you've got various slots. No doubt if that's a thing you're into, it's probably rather powerful. You can use those sequences for MIDI type sequence, note type sequences is my understanding, or for modulation type stuff. So that's your MZEG variant in here. But I'm just really not going to touch it because it's going to take more time than is justified. You've then got a screen or a tab. There's a lot of moving around in here, which manages your overall, how the engine is running, whether you're polyphonic, monophonic, whether you're getting into unisons and things like that. You do have to get your head around how this works. Some things are consistent once you understand them, inconsistent until you do. Like in the voice here, if we put ourselves into monophonic mode and we want our glide, we can see there's something called glide here, but then you have to find it here and turn it on and set its time up here. Why, I can understand that that's an oscillator function, but why is it not down here? There's that double turning things on sometimes occurs. And then we've got this, the routing. When you first start and you go to, and good on them, there are some initialization patches. For some reason I've got no patches in here at all. I don't know whether it's because I just didn't download the extra user patches or whatever. I've got none here, so I'm not going to show you anything because I've got nothing to show. But no doubt you can work those things out, and I don't spend a lot of time on presets. You've got the normal init patch, which is what you're seeing here with a whole lot of architecture already built. So that is what I'm referring to as a Jupiter 8 style. Here's a synth with all the modules already wired together for you. And there are assignments to these macro type controls up top, or you can initialize to a blank. Now, this is where I really started to come to terms with and get happy with the synth more than anything else. We'll run through my goods and bads, and then I will go through and I will build a couple of sounds right from scratch, focusing not so much on the intricacies of each module, but as in how it all goes together. So then you can spend some time playing with the device and yourself based on the understanding of how to put it together and start to get the most from it. And I think then it becomes a very, very interesting synthesizer. My goods and bads. I think that it's a quality sound and character instrument. It's very versatile. It has some hard limits, like not being able to bring in your own samples and the like. But once you understand how the device works, which will take some time, then it is quality sound, there's a quality character, and it's versatile. But it's versatile more in the sense of a forward-looking, shall we say, digital synthesizer than in a backward-looking analog synthesizer. That's not to say that you can't do nice analogy style sounds, but a lot of its power and focus is in the digital arena of things that you can do with the whole digital modify this, that, and the other. It is unusual, and that's good. One of the problems with the popular synth that everybody gets and everybody uses those presets is you hear the same things track after track after track after track, and it's not good for anybody. It's not good for the audience. It's not good for the indie musician who's trying to stand out and needs to stand out. So if you come in with this as the idea of, oh, well, it's going to give me the sound, maybe the presets do, obviously, I can't say, but I'm approaching it from the perspective of, let's start from the ground up, which means that the way that you wire the whole thing together, the way that you use it, you're far more likely to come out with something that is unique. That has been a liability from the marketing perspective of it, but in terms of, and I always look at it from the instrument perspective and from how can an independent musician benefit from this, there's a lot of power to be had in here. The bads, it is a little odd and it is a little complex. However, that oddness and complexity is a result of the fact that they've tried to almost wipe the slate clean and start again. Once I came to that understanding that this was in many ways more like a Euro rack, as in here are a whole pile of modules and you can glue them together as you like, rather than that pre-built architecture, which I'm referring to as Jupiter 8, then you really start to realize, hang on, there's a lot more this can do. And the more time you spend in this, the more you would go, I could do that. This is an environment you could spend a lot of time in as a sound designer, and even if you're not an experienced sound designer, if you start the way I'm suggesting and you spend time with this instrument rather than just going, you need to give me exactly the sound that everybody else is using, then you're going to do well. Give it time, and then you will find that there comes a point where it's like, what I'm doing really has character, and that character is unique to me. Just as my records sound like me. If people go, oh, but that's not cool, man, that's simply because they're not my market. And assuming that I was making it specially for them is, well, probably no wonder they're upset. It's not cheap, but if it's an instrument you're going to commit to, it's also not expensive. So it depends what you're looking to achieve. If you're just looking for one of those instruments that's going to land you all the perfect presets to make the perfect sound that everybody else is making, it's not a path that I encourage, but this is probably never designed as that. It was designed to be almost like having Reaktor without having to dig down into Reaktor and all those little modules that you glue together. Overall, I think it's a very compelling synth for somebody who wants to put the time and energy in to taking advantage of what's really there, which means that rather than putting it up against, just picking names out of the air, something like Dune, this probably goes more against a phase plant or a zebra or something like that. It's a real kind of start from scratch, decide what you want to make, and go out there and make it kind of instrument. And I like that. I really, really do. Right, here's where it gets interesting. So as before, I said let's start with the blank preset. So that means that nothing is attached to anything else. This is deliberate. We now have to work our way to actually making something happen. We know with the synthesizer that we've got an oscillator and it has to be triggered and the sound has to be routed out. So let's find an oscillator. Oh, there's an oscillator. We know because it says oscillator 1, and we will route it to what looks like the output. And it works. The envelope, and you have to remember where these are, is, as I said, hardwired. So we've got the ability to do that basic thing. Slightly unusual looking envelope layout compared to just your 4 ADSR sliders, but it allows you to do quite a few things that your standard ADSR don't do as well. So there's a bit to be going on with, but rather than looking at getting scared, just work with your A, your D, your S, and your R, and then work out what the other bits do by seeing how they interact. No, you can't drag the graphic around, and I don't think that's really a problem. You've got options for gate, one shot, loop, so you can do a loop, but we won't go too far down that road. Very simple. We've now got a simple sound. But I hear you say we're going to want to have a filter on that. So we install a filter, but again, nothing happens. Remember, we've got to route things. So we need to find our filter. There we go. We can double click this, undoes, wire it in, and wire it to our outs. Great. Let's put a little bit of delay on, because listening to things without gets a bit. So let's pull this a bit short. A little bit longer than that. That just softens the sound for listening a little bit. So we've got our oscillator going into our filter, going into our bank of effects. As it says down here, this area is polyphonic, so whatever's happening in here is polyphonic. So if I press 4 keys, then there are actually 4 oscillators, 4 filters. But then this is monophonic. Doesn't matter how many keys I press, there will still just be one delay unit. Important to understand that distinction down the track, especially when we get into drive and things like that. Nice and simple. Now we look at an envelope. So we bounce back to our envelopes. We've got a modulation envelope here. There's one they've already created. We want to assign something to move that filter. So we click this, see how it now lights up with E2, so it tells us what we're sending from, and we assign that to there. We now grab this E2 and move it up or down. It's an interesting system, and it does work. Any of you who watch know that I kind of like to see a modulation matrix, but this system works fairly well. There's color coding, it tells you what's going to where quite well. And you've got various options for how this envelope behaves. That is good. So let's look at our oscillators with a little bit more care. These are a wavetables. Serum became the famous one for wavetables, but really earlier it was the microwaves, the PPGs, or the PPG wave terms or what have you, that started this whole process. The idea of having one oscillator that we could move through various forms. So this is moving through your standard analog style forms, but they can move through all kinds of different sorts of forms. Let's look at this. We'll open our filter. And obviously by modulating that, then we can have all kinds of movement. Matter of fact, let's look at doing one of those now. Let's take our velocity, and instead of applying it to level, let's apply it to this. There are various ways you can apply that. So that changes the timbre. As we change our velocity. That's pretty cool. Modulation is surprisingly easy to assign and use, and that's a real winner. That's our forms. We've got a lot of forms in here. And you can try them. Without actually applying them. And there's also the ability to musing, didn't find that one before. But let's go back to our basics, which is this sine, triangle, saw, square. Let's just remove that modulation for the moment. We have the ability to apply different sorts of methods to how these wavetables get handled. Basically put, they're a kind of wave shaping. No, they are not wave shaping, but they are a kind of wave shaping in the sense that they are ways to use digital math to shape the wave at its source. So while it seems complex, all you got to do is very basically think that these are a couple of preset styles of how it shapes or reshapes that wave. So we've got a sine wave sounding like a pling. A lot of them, and inside quite a few of them, there are variants as well. So if we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, if we've got 10 here, if each of those had 2, we'd have 20. If each of those has 3, we'd have 30. Essentially different algorithms for how we can shape that wave right inside the oscillator. And that is interesting. But again, I'm not going to get into what they do and how they do it and why they do it, because it's far better for you to sit there and work it out yourself. One thing that I think is nice on Europa, which does essentially the same sort of thing as this, is that it shows you the resulting wave after the math has been done. So rather than still showing me a sine wave, but playing me some kind of a heptastic pulse, it will show me said heptastic pulse in the screen. That makes it a lot easier to get a sense of what's happening here. But nonetheless, it's all there to be heard. And various different forms, some of which are good for making noises. The basic one offers you the ability to filter. So that's just using the digital math to roll off the highs. And that, of course, sounds quite different from the filter. So don't forget, there is the option to set up your wave here and then to actually filter it here if you are in the standard mode. So, nice. The next thing that this does is these phase modulation, or FM oscillators. You have to turn them on or nothing happens. We can now fly this in. We've got the other one as well. So we have a 3-operator FM oscillator. Right there. That's before we get into doing anything interesting. That filtering happens before the PM section. But this, of course, happens after it because we routed it that way. Cool. So that allows us to create really quite complex waves. Initially, you'll find that there is a tendency to just create these sort of hard digital sounding waves, and you do need to learn to be subtle. Still falls in the realms of what we would call analog. Yeah, we've got quite a lot of variety and variation in there from just this modulation. So there's a lot of flexibility. Just really take your time, because initially you're just going to get these hard, icky digital noises. And the synth is capable of a lot more. You just got to learn to be a lot more subtle, turn the knobs a lot less. Cool. Number 2 is exactly the same. But let's do something a little different. Seeing we're playing with this, sorry, I was about to press the other button. So the auxiliary. Here we've got our auxiliary, and we need to take a source from somewhere. Let's bring in oscillator 2, and rather than sending it to the filter, send it to the auxiliary in, which is here. So oscillator 2, we can turn oscillator 1 off. We're not hearing anything because it's not plugged in. Let's turn up this. Actually, just get rid of that. All right, now why am I not? Oh, because I haven't turned it on. So we're using oscillator 2, sending it to the PM auxiliary in. So now we have a 4-operator FM synth. Nice. Very nice indeed. If we were to use an envelope to control this, we would have very simple DX7 kind of sound happening. So a lot of versatility right there on the oscillator before we get into filters and the like. If we want to get rid of that, right click, delete, gone. Easy. So we have our interesting sound, but let's say we didn't want that oscillator going there, we wanted it going here. So now it's feeding to the filter. Tune, detune, all of the usual things. What about a little bit of vibrato? Because non-vibratoing sounds get a little bit, yeah. So we can assign that there, raise it. Cool, working like a ball one. Let's turn that right down. Mod wheel, this one took me a little bit. Press the M. Let's assign that to, where's my level go? Here. So this. The system is surprisingly logical once you get your head around it. It does require some double handling like that, but it's pretty easy to see who is doing what. Things are color-coded. See how it's green, green, green? This is red, red. So you've got quite a bit of logic to how it goes. Like any sound design, you do have to carry a certain amount in your head, but given time, we could work our way backwards by looking at this and going, okay, that's E2, so that's this fella here that's doing this. If anything here was modified, let's say by the pitch bend control, let's say pitch bend was modifying attack, we would see it here as well. Probably a bit of an odd thing to do, but you can see fairly easily when you follow what you're doing. Auxiliary, we don't need anymore. We could feed any signal from anywhere that we want. We can feed from here to the auxiliary, so that what's coming out of the filter, so post filter, we can feed. It will get increasingly interesting, ugly and noisy, the further along the signal chain that we tap something off. You just can't cross the mono to poly area. There's only one way, and that is out. Cool. You've got noise sources. We need to allow them to come in. Now we can send our noise straight past everything or to the filter. So commonly we would send it before the filter. Woohoo! And again, there are quite a lot of noise things. There's something else we can do though. We can feed FM a signal. So let's say we wanted to take oscillator 2, like what it's doing, and feed it to our filter. So that's applying what oscillator 2 is doing to wobble the filter at audio rate. That works rather nicely. Just back that noise off a bit. And this is how we build an analog style sound in a very digital synth. There are other things we could look for, various kinds of movement, like we could look at, say, taking our random LFO and applying that to our... Actually, no, let's apply this to here. And also, let's apply this to 6 to here. But we only want a small amount of control here. Actually, let's go. Now this can loop and just keep moving in an ungainly sort of a fashion, or we can set it to one shot, which means that every key press is slightly, and that's what we want. Might still be a little much. So if we want to go monophonic, if we want to do the unison thing, we could get up to 6 voices. Cool. All works. Again, not going to go into everything with unisons. Not really necessary, but see how we've got our system laid out the way that we want it. Let's say now we decide that we want to add something else. We could add another oscillator, or we could add, let's say, some drive. Not doing anything at the moment, so let's plug our filter to our distortion to our out. Bit much. We could pull back our drive amount or our mix, or we could say maybe we're doing this the wrong way and take our inputs 1, 2, 3. Sometimes it might be nice to have another way to do that with a little less changing, but it's not that much of a biggie. Just think that these days you probably could have a drag and drop thing without having to do the wiring, which means a little less effort. So now, even though it physically sits after my filter, we've got our distortion actually happening before our filter. Yep, it's still there. That is a polyphonic distortion, so it's distorting each voice individually. And that's pretty cool, because we're getting the advantage of the bulk and the body and the extra tortuousness of that drive. But our filter is controlling it. Let's look at this filter in a little bit more detail. We obviously don't have to have the filter doing anything filtery at all. These are the models. There's an Asimov, nicely named. Inside that we've got 4-pole, 2-pole, or 1-pole models. Let's just back our distortion right back. pretty nice sounding filters, fun models. The Monarch. Oh, from one model to another, they don't necessarily keep your settings. The Monarch is a nice sounding toy. 2 poles, 1 pole, band pass, a peak, high pass, a pair of notches, so that's like a phase sort of a thing. But if you pick one filter that's the best, possibly the Monarch. Combs with different models as to how they work. Here, how that adds a kind of drive of its own. So a few different shapes. Digital filters, but they're non-linear filters. They're actually not great if you're trying to make strings all the time. But generally, there's some really nice stuff. I think that one's claim to fame is its resonance and then the state variable. That's the little Oberheim SEM model, and quite nice too. Nice as both a softer filter for strings and pads where you don't want it to sound like, here, look, I'm using a 303 filter sound. Or the ability to put this nice, fiery but not aggressive little filter sound on top. And then versions of the state variable. So you can modulate between the pair of them. Cool. Amp we can leave alone. You'll be wanting to know more about these. Some of the default settings are just what were you thinking? So quite a nice phaser. We will go to Stomp. It's a pretty cool thing. The flanger, similar. Non-linear lab is distortions. And they seem to have, I'm not sure whether they're impulse responses or a sort of a cabinet kind of thing. Different models. I would need to spend more time on those to know whether I would find use for them, but they're interesting. And then the quad chorus, quite nice, and reverb, of course. analog style sound, really not that hard to make once you've done it a time or two and go, that's how this functions. And we can get a lot more creative with what we're doing with our things. Like we could take this fella here, assign him to there, give ourselves... only the scratching the surface of what each individual module can do, because it's each has got a lot of ability, and I'm going to just tear up a lot of time. But that gives us a really, really nice synth. Now we'll look at making a far more digital sound. Again, we've gone to nothing. I'm going to say we're going to want a pair of oscillators. We're going to want, let's put one of these in before the filter, and then our filter, so we can wire that to there. You don't seem to be able to wire things backwards. You seem to have to go in the direction in which the signal is going to go. Let's pop some noise in. What will we feed to our auxiliary? Let's feed that to our auxiliary. There is the ability to feed back the signal from any point, so we can pick a point. I think that would be here. Let's tap this. Nope, that's obviously the wrong one, so we'll put that to there and here. So it won't let you wire something that you can't. So that's saying that feedback path, the signal will come from post filter, and we'll reinsert it pre whatever we do with this fella. And then let's give ourselves 1, 2 of those. I don't know whether we'll use both, but we'll just wire them up, and that can go to our outs. Let's put a little bit of deal A on it, just so, because digital sounds tend to need a lot more nicey nice, so let's also give them a little bit of the old chorus. Might as well put some reverb on too, because digital sounds are just far more likely to need this. So we might as well put it there from the beginning. Let's pick a thing. Love Parade sounds like fun. We're thinking more of a pad sound. I do find the envelopes a little fast. They go out only to 16 seconds, which is slow. Very questionable for pad work. It's sort of barely there as far as I'm concerned, but it's just enough. There's a Reason synth, Parsec, that's only 15 seconds, and we manage. So if you find it's a bit slow, then you may need to just either fly in a second modulator to play with your timings, or just automate it somewhere else. Righto. What might we want here in slot A? Definitely not a bit crusher. Benedict doesn't like bit crushers. See him talking about himself in third person. Let's use a frequency shifter. These are always fun. Not a pitch shifter, but moving all the frequencies equally. Therefore, you get a ring modulator type result from them. And that's going to our filter. Let's go with the SVF. That is going to require some movement. See how once you're used to it, you can move really quite quickly. One of the tricks with digital sounds is don't let them get too bright. because all that work you do gives them very, very bright, jaggy edges up top. If that's what you're looking for, great, but they will quickly make your mix brittle and unpleasing. I did not work out what an exciter envelope does, so I'm just going to bypass it. No doubt it does something interesting, but I could not for the life of me really work out what it was without spending time reading the manual. The manual is pretty decent, so don't get the impression that I think that it's no good. Just really kind of take your time to work out how it goes for you. We've got a fair amount of movement already. Not doing anything with regards to tunings or anything like that at all, or vibrato. The vibrato is coming in from this shifter, which is pre-filter. Could be post-filter, but it's pre-filter. Nice. We're getting quite a lot of extra shine off this fella. Let's just pull this one into focus and give it a modulation of some kind. So this one will do. Apply this to here. Let's move it. Let's move it a lot. Whack that up there. Kind of pretty. Almost feel like I could open a Bon Jovi record with it. Let it rock. Anyway, sorry. Distract myself there. Really nice sound. Everybody wants to hear distortion. Let's say we wanted to move, I don't know, our delay. Let's see what happens if we take our note pitching and move it to our delay time. Looks like we can. So let's see what's going to happen. Let's pull that up a little. Let's see what happens. Now we're causing our delay to recalculate there where it goes and moves. Let's go the other way around. Kind of interesting. Again, I'm not in love with the slow envelopes or fast envelopes. That presents us with some issues. So unless we have the ability to add a lag, which I haven't noticed, I'm not saying that you can't, I'm not totally in love with, but we can do it, and that's interesting. In some situations, that would be really super. In others, not so much. Maybe there's something we can move here. Anima is a funny one, so let's move that. What do we want to move? Let's move this one. It's not super audible there in what it's doing. How about some ring modulation? If we change that, you will find that there is quite a bit of messing around in Okay, cool. That's providing ring modulator that changes based on our Okay. As to where we would use that sound, don't know. Obviously more of a background sound than a lead sound. Possibly got a little quieter there as we were controlling some of those ugly highs a little bit. But it shows you the fact that the synth can go very nicely in an analogy style direction. You could make nice string sounds. I made a beautiful cello sound, really beautiful cello sound. First sound I made, actually. Lovely cello. But you can't save anything in the demo. And I've made quite a few really nice digital FME type pads and, well, that sound as well. I've made a few of those sorts of like, okay, somebody's been chewing on rocks and lemon juice. But there's a big variety of what the instrument can do, which is great. And the fact that you can rearrange your routing really quite easily is a big bonus for the sound designer. Make sure you take your time with the instrument. This is one you do need to grow into, and one, well, I will very strongly say read the manual and then read the manual again. And this is an instrument that will benefit you tremendously the more you just spend time playing with it and going, if I do this, I get that. And you could probably spend a decade in this instrument and still feel like there might be something else you get. I would like to see how necessary it is, but I would like to see the ability to fly in your own samples and the like. But in reality, it may not be that important. It's not that common that I fly my own samples into Europa. I can probably get exactly the result that I want from the existing things, but just that feeling that you could either bring in your own samples or draw your own waveform in some way. If you have any questions, not about support for NI, please, but if you have any questions, ask them on down below, preferably after hitting the subscribe yourself button. You can also pop it over to higherhertz.com, subscribe yourself there because there's another channel of information. Some crosses over, some of it's quite different. They have articles about loudspeakers. My name again, Benedict for Higher Hertz. You have a great